Being positive is easy. Being negative, on the other hand, is really, really hard, which is an inversion of our normal take on the matter, because we think we have to strive to stay positive. And if we stop striving, then we'll just end up being negative. But when we talk about being negative, we don't really mean getting into a sulk or getting into a mood and saying everything is rubbish, because that's a positive doing. It's something that we do. It's a projection of ours. It's a viewpoint that we put on things, project on things. It's an act of positive doing. So saying everything is rubbish is also positive. Saying anything is positive, because we're overlaying it with our own stuff. And that is very, very easy. It's as easy as falling off a log. And when we say something is as easy as falling off a log, we mean that it just happens. If we fail to pay attention and we sit down on a sleepy bit of the log, we're going to fall right off it, land on our asses. And we don't do that. It's a consequence of our not paying attention. So being positive is what happens to us by default. And it happens all by itself, even though we hitch a ride, so to speak, by going along with it and thinking, yeah, I want to say this. I want to say that everything is crap. But it isn't. It's not that this is my free choice to say this. It's just a mechanical reaction which happens all by itself that I identify with. So being positive in this psychological sense means perpetuating what's already there and building what is already there. So we start off somewhere, and it doesn't matter where we start off, because once we're there, we build on it. We start off on our journey on this basis, and that means we never leave the basis, because we're building on it. We're going forward. So positive existence is a type of existence which has no freedom in it, even though we think that there is freedom in it. And to put this the other way, positive living is where we are driven by mechanical forces and we go along with those mechanical forces, which is not effortful. It's abdicating our autonomy, giving up our autonomy to whatever coercive forces exist in the world. It's like seeing who the biggest, strongest guy in the group is and agreeing with him, because then you're on his side and you're protected. So that's why we go along with the biggest, strongest forces. It's a very instinctive thing to identify with the strongest force, the strongest mechanical force, and experience loyalty to it. And loyalty ultimately means that we see it as being us. It's like cheering on a team. We're really cheering on ourselves, even though it's not the done thing to say that. Whenever we identify with someone and think they're great and cheer them on, we're identifying with ourselves, we're projecting ourselves. And whenever we join a group, this too, because we're identifying with the group, we're identifying with ourselves, because we're only choosing the group because they reflect what we want or what we think. And the thing about positive living is, therefore, that it's a road to suffering, even though we can kid ourselves it's not, and that we're going to a good place. And I know I keep on saying this, but it's kind of crucial, really, because there's two directions. There's a direction of self-deception, which leads to an ultimate car crash of one sort or another. It leads to tears. And there's the other direction, which is towards the truth. Sounds kind of simplistic to put it like this, but I can't think of any other way to say it. It is clear and understandable in this way, at least. Though when you're in the thick of it, it isn't at all clear. It's very confusing because we don't know what's truth and what is deception. And the whole process of life, really, it's maybe to get better, we could say it. Seeing the difference between the false and the true, the authentic and the fake. We love going on about fake this and fake that, but everything's fake. We're fake too. It's all a fakery. And so mental health lies in our spotting the fakery. Instead of just saying one thing's fake and getting annoyed about it and angry about it and marching up and down, holding a placard, which is just a mechanical reaction, what is helpful is to see that it's all fake, every last bit of it, and we don't even know what non-fake looks like. We wouldn't know what non-fake looks like if it came and slapped us in the face. So that's the more helpful way to see things, because when we see that everything is fake, then that really does put a stop to all of our positive doing, all of our positive enterprises, because if everything's fake, there's nowhere to start, there's nothing to promote. Well, there's lots of stuff to promote, but it's all fake, so you don't really want to do that, because if you promote something that's fake, you're locked into this situation where you're promoting and promoting and pushing and pushing and extending and extending, and you feel great because you're deluded enough to think that you're getting somewhere great, so there's lots of motivation. And as time goes on, you don't get anywhere great, because no one ever gets anywhere great through positive action. And then it gets rotten, but you keep on persevering because you don't know what else to do. You're locked onto the path, as I was saying in the last installment. You're locked on. And we could call this doom-seeking behaviour, because we're locked on to what is essentially our doom. It's our doom because the basis we're operating out of is fake, even though we're saying it's not, and even though we're committing ourselves to it over and over again. So we have to discover sooner or later that it is fake, and that isn't going to be fun. It's not a bad thing, but at the time, we certainly won't see it as not being a bad thing. We'll see it as the worst thing ever. We'll see it as a terrible catastrophe, because we will be called upon to disinvest in all of our structures, all of our beliefs, all of our systems in a very short space of time, and that isn't humanly possible, because all of that positive stuff has become us, so it's like we're fighting ourselves. We just end up in a conflicted situation with ourselves, fighting. So when we fight, that's a positive thing. So if I see that everything is positive is deluded, and I fight against my positive actions, my positive approach, then I'm just putting another layer of positive, another layer of delusion on it. So it's quite possible to imagine that we're on a spiritual path, but really we're just putting another level of positivity, because spiritual is not positive. I can't progress purposefully in a positive spiritual way. Well, I can progress in a positive way, but it ain't a spiritual way, because it's just unconsciousness. It's sleepwalking. So I'm sleepwalking, but now I'm labeling my sleepwalking as being something spiritual. And that feels better to me, because I know I'm not like all the rest of the sleepwalkers. what lies behind the positive, the mechanical force of building upon what is already there, is entropy. Pure and simple. So we're sailing in our little sailing ships, and the wind that is blowing us is the wind of entropy. And we're going downhill, even though the metaphor is kind of threatening to fall to pieces here. Entropy sets in the moment we say we know what stuff is. The moment I allow myself to believe I know what the world is, or what life is it, or who I am. That's the moment entropy sets in. And that really is a very straightforward restatement of the third law of thermodynamics, which states that the entropy of a closed system always increases. When I say I know what the world is, or what life is, or what anything is, that's a closed system. When I identify as this person, this self, this me, that's a closed system. And if we think about it, or if we reflect upon it, which is a better way to put it, we can say this, because I can only know anything when I shut the door on all further information. Because if there is any further information coming on, as there always is in the open universe, there's always further information to come. There's always extra perspective. There's always this process whereby we learn what we thought was such and such reveals itself to be a mistake, and what we thought was such and such isn't. It's something different. In other words, you can't know anything. Knowing just doesn't work. But if we want to know, and we do want to know, we want to hold on tight to stuff and say, yeah, this is this and that is that, and I am whatever, then we have to close off all extra information, all new information, all updates. It's like, yes, I know what it's all about now, and I'm closing the book, which is, of course, what we do all the time. If I convert to be some kind of sect or religion, what that really means is I'm closing the book on everything else. And that's the beginning of my doom. That's the beginning of stagnation, which I can't admit to be stagnation, or that's the beginning of me going down a road that on one level I know it's a dead end, and I can't admit that it's a dead end, which is the Macbeth quote about wading in blood so far that going back would be harder than carrying on, really, even though carrying on's horrible. Going back would be worse, because then we'd have to see what we did. So as soon as we feel that we know something, it's not something that we'd consciously reflect on and say, I know who I am, because who says that to us? We all know it without having to say it. And what that means is we've all closed the door to further insight. We're all living in a closed world, so we're all subject to entropy. And what the entropy does, what the action of entropy results in, is a deterioration of everything, a degradation of everything. But at the same time everything deteriorates or degrades, my ability or capacity to perceive that it has degraded has also degraded. So I'm on this particular slippery slope, this downwards transformation, where I'm continually becoming less than myself, and then less again, a cruder and cruder copy of myself, and I haven't got a clue. This might sound somewhat strange, but it happens every time you go to the pub and have a few drinks. You get stupid and stupider, and you don't know it because you're too drunk to know it. You're too stupid to know you're stupid. It happens to Happens to us all the time. It actually feels like fun, generally. I suppose the consensus is that, yeah, it's fun. Why else would you go to the pub and drink pints or whatever if it wasn't fun? But what it is, it's entropy. And entropy, when you're sliding down that slippery slide, it feels like fun, and then you hit the ground with a bump and it's rotten, but you can't go back up again because it's a slippery one-way slide. So we would be prepared to accept this to be the case with alcohol intoxication, possibly, if we wanted to think about it a bit. But we won't accept it to be the case about our identity, about the ego, about me being me, and closing the book here and saying, yes, I know who I am, I know what I want from life, I know what life is, I know what I'm supposed to do. And making plans on that basis, having goals on that basis. So we can see that having plans and having goals is all positive stuff, because I'm making out its progression when really it's entropy, because I'm building on my unexamined basis, and I'm setting off on a journey on this imagined basis that actually turns out not to be there at all. So at the end of this journey, I find out that I haven't gone on a journey, but I just think that I have. So anyway, in life, we're all on this positive kick. We're all doing the positive stuff. And no matter what we do, it's all positive, which means that it's all just going downhill. And it's all leading to nothing but tears. And the only way that can't be the case is if we stop doing the positive stuff. We stop obeying the mechanical force that is acting upon us. And that's really, really difficult. It's not a matter of gritting your teeth or straining and saying, yeah, I'm going to fight against entropy. I'm going to battle against entropy, because it isn't. The battling, as I said earlier, is just another manifestation of entropy. James Carse is trying to remember who it was who said it, and it's James Carse, I think. He says that unless we keep changing, we don't exist. So to exist is to change, and to change is to exist. I don't mean the type of change where we're progressing towards our projections, because that isn't change. So the moment we think we know who we are and what life is all about, that's when change stops, because there's no change in a closed system. Because in order, at the risk of stating the obvious, in order to change, you'd have to be in an open system, because a closed system is always just what we've said it is and nothing else. In other words, change means letting go of the known, and we kind of think we can have change and hold on to the known, hold on to who we think we are, etc., and have change, but that's hallucinatory change. The peculiarity here is we'd all say, well, actually, the hell with you, I do exist. So bugger off, stop telling me I don't exist. But we don't, because nothing exists in a closed system, only hallucinations, only kind of virtual reality stuff, the misleading appearances. And the misleading appearance in a closed system is this misleading perception that I exist, but I don't. Because reality itself is continually moving on, and the moment I stop moving on, I drop out. I've dropped out of reality. I still think I'm in reality. but it's not. It's what John Bennett calls the psychostatic mode. Somehow we've forgotten what reality is, and we think reality is this static picture that we have in our head, so we can say, yes, I exist because I'm in reality. But really, I am a static picture of myself in a static picture of the world, neither of which exist. But we don't know it, so it's just the same as getting drunk. We cease to exist and we don't know it. We don't cotton on. It's like being dead and not knowing you've died, or like being a ghost and thinking you've still got a body. That kind of thing. Now, the thing about this is that we will twig it eventually. And this perception comes to us in a highly disagreeable form, naturally enough. So I might have feelings of being separated from reality, alienated from reality. I might have feelings of meaninglessness, which is kind of what Jung calls soul sickness. So according to Jung, because we're all so damn rational, this has become a soul sickness. And instead of getting spots or rash or high temperature, we just plunged into meaninglessness. And there's nothing worse. There's nothing more rotten than meaninglessness. So we can fight against it and make things meaningful. Say, if I do this or if I attain that, that's meaningful. Yay for me. But it isn't really. That's not meaningful. I'm just kidding myself. It is meaningful. It's a game. So games are how we survive. We manufacture our own meaning. But eventually the games we play pall on us. They become threadbare. They fail to satisfy. And the central game is the game of me, the self game. And this is really bright and sparky to start off with, and I'm full of myself. I can't wait to achieve my goals and do all the stuff. And isn't it great? This is the euphoria phase of the cycle. But then as time goes on, it gets very, very tedious indeed. And deep down, I know there's no point to it. And deep down, I know I've diverged from reality itself and that the whole thing is a meaningless exercise. And my games can't rescue me from this sense of meaninglessness anymore. And it feels like a thoroughly rotten situation. When our games don't do it for us anymore and we can't use them anymore to distract ourselves from what's actually going on, on the whole, we call this depression, and we say it's an illness or sickness or some kind of thing like that, a pathological condition. But the weird thing is, it isn't. When we look at it in this way, in the way that we've just been exploring, looking at just now, this insight is actually the first sign of health.